In our video number 16, we are going to start with the next unit called Presentation of Data. Let us first look into what should be done in order to start with the presentation of data. Step 1 we have learned so far is statistical enquiry. A statistical enquiry is an investigation on a topic to collect data. Now step 2 is collection of data. The data so collected is called the raw data because it is the first-hand information. Collection of data can be done using a primary source or a secondary source. Step 3 is classification of the data. Is based on similarities and dissimilarities of the data so collected. They can be classified according to the place on the earth, that is geographical classification, based on time called chronological classification, based on attributes called qualitative classification, and based on numerical facts called the quantitative classification. After the data is classified, it needs to be organized in such a manner that is easy to use. And we organize the data into frequency array or frequency distribution. We have learnt so far the organization of data into frequency array or frequency distribution. Now in this unit, we are going to learn the step 5, which is presentation of this data in a systematic form. This presentation can be done through a table, a diagram, or through a graph. Let's learn what is the need or what are the reasons for presentation of data in a systematic form. Presentation of data helps us to simplify the complex data. It helps us in comparison of the data. Third, it facilitates statistical analysis. And then it provides a quick reference and can be identified easily. Now, when the data is very small, we can present it in the form of a small text called Textual Presentation, which is the data in the form of a sentence or a paragraph. What type of data can be presented in the textual form? The data that is small and that is qualitative in nature, or qualitative data can be presented in the textual form. Let us look into examples. There are 23 boys and 20 girls in class 11C. So this does not need a very complicated method of presentation. You can just say it in a sentence. Hence, here, the data being too small can be represented in the form of a text. The other example is the fourth phase of lockdown to start from 18th May 2020. Now, since this data is also just a sentence, so it can be presented in the form of a text. Now, what if the data is large to be presented in the form of a text? It would need a long time to read through the text and understand it. So, a better method of presentation of data needs to be formed. The first method that we are going to study is the tabular presentation. That means presentation of the data in the form of a table. Let us look at one example. This is table number 1, which says literacy in India by sex and location. In bracket, it is given %. Then it has 3 columns. The second column is further divided into 2. And it has 1, 2, 3, 4 rows. and each row has a heading. Each column has a heading. And then the cells are filled up with some numerical value. The table so formed also has a source node, that is, from where this data is collected. It says it has been collected from the Census of India 2011, wherein the literacy rates relate to population aged 7 years and above. There is a footnote too, which says that the figures are rounded into 2 digits after decimal. So this table gives us a wide picture of the literacy rate in India. Now let us see what are the components that have been used. It has a table number. It has a heading that says literacy in India by sex, that is, there are male and female literacy rates given. Also it says location, that is, whether it is rural or urban. And then it says that the data is presented in percentages. So the male population in the rural regions is 79.3 literate, whereas in urban it is 90.80%. The total literate persons of males is 82.32%. Then the females in the rural region are 59.70% literate, and in the urban regions it is 80.30%. The total people literate in the rural areas is 68.42, and that in the urban areas is 84.71. Then it also gives us a source node, that is from where it has been collected, and also gives us another note called footnote, which tells us what these figures are up to. That is, they are rounded to 2 digits after the decimal place. Let's now look into the procedure of how to form a data in the tabular form or in the form of a table. So all of us must remember that these are the important components in forming a table. The first one is the table number. Like in our mathematics textbooks, we have chapter 1, exercise 1.1 that says first exercise from the first chapter. If the exercise number says 12.3, it means that the exercise is from the 12th chapter and is the third exercise from the 12th chapter. Likewise, you can give table numbers. And then a required apt short title or heading must be given to tell what this table is going to inform us. Then there needs to be a head note as to how you are representing the table or the contents. Then the table should be divided into columns and rows. Columns are vertical and rows are horizontal. So this table has 1, 2 and 3 columns. The second column is divided into 2 more sub-columns. Then we have 1, 2, 3, 4 and 5 rows. The headings that are given in the rows are called stubs or row headings. The headings in the columns are called as column heading. Then we have subheads, and these are row or stub entries in the rows. And finally we have a total for columns. That means this and this will be added up here. This and this adds up here. And then we have total for rows. That means this and this adds up here. This and this adds up here. This and this adds up here. And finally you have the total for columns as well as rows. Now these small boxes under the subheads are called as cells. Well, these cells are filled up with row entries, and these cells will be filled up with the numerical values. The whole of this boxes is called as the body of the table, which gives us the compact information about the table. Then below the table, you have a source note and a footnote. The source note tells us from which source we have gathered this information. Since the previous example was a secondary data, we could inform or write down the source from which we could gather that information. Any other information regarding this table could be given in the footnote. Now, what does a table actually do? Or how a table should be? Is that the table should be simple and compact. The table should focus on main components for comparison. Could we not compare the number of males and female literates in the rural and urban areas in the example that we just saw? The table should be complete and self-explanatory. That means the moment you see the table, you should be able to understand what it represents. And it should be complete. That means there should be no gaps in the table or blanks in the table. Then the table should be attractive, not that it should be decorated, but the moment you see a table, you should be in a position to read it. Then the table should give us accurate values and it should be free of any errors. The classification should be done according to the attributes. So those were the requisites for forming or drawing a good table.